So I'll try and keep it relatively short, and if you have any questions, then just feel free to interrupt me in between. Yeah. I'm trying to keep this more informal as far as possible. Okay, so to start, my name is Debaran. I'm an Indian international student, and I'm in my final year now. You can call me Dev for short. And I study computer engineering. Now, throughout my 4 years, I've kind of been a jack of all trades kind of guy. I've been trying out many different things. When I was in high school, I used to primarily work on aerospace-related projects, and I actually went to the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas for the International Space Shuttle Design Competition, where my team proceeded to win the finals. But that was the end of my aerospace-related work. After that, in my first year, I did material science research, and then in the second year, I went to Antarctica. Third year, I went into software development, and now, well, I'm in my final year, trying not to do anything too unrelated to my major this time around. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of what I'm actually going to talk about first. So to begin with, it seems like font also doesn't work on this. So first I'm going to talk about the expedition and what we actually did there, what this is about, how it actually happened. Then I'm going to talk about the actual process of working with raw data and coming up with a final product. The next thing is just, well, what happened at the exhibition. And then I'm going to talk about my current work at the new apps lab. So yeah, the expedition. Now, this expedition is a part of the Extreme Environments program. This was started by the School of Creative Media and non-engineering department. But what they strive to do is actually bring students from various departments and to actually make them work in a cross-disciplinary fashion. So we kind of, like scientists working with artists to actually help convey information to the public. Now there are 4 main things that they hope to achieve. It's part of CDU's Discovery Rich curriculum, as they call it. Yeah, so as I mentioned, it's interdisciplinary teams. So we have to form teams with people from different departments. This is without exception. 300 people actually applied for this program, and only 23 got selected at the end. We had a team of international engineers, artists, scientists, so on, who actually vetted each proposal. And there's a requirement that each team has to have different people. So my team had 1 chemist, 1 computer engineer, and 1 person from the School of Creative Media. The next thing is field work. We absolutely cannot just do this from the confines of the university. The whole point of the Extreme Environments program is to actually go out to extreme environment. So we do field work, we carry all our equipment with us. And then after we get our data, we actually proceed to do some analysis. And the key is, well, you've probably heard think outside the box quite a bit by now, so much so that it's become old. But we kind of remove all conventional processes out of the equation. And then the final thing is to come up with some new media art. So I guess my title may be a bit misleading. It says data analytics. While that was partly what we did, we also primarily focused on generating art. So this is a rundown of our actual expedition. This is straight out of the infographics that my team actually made. But it's interesting to know that we went to Buenos Aires first, which is exactly on the opposite side of the world from Hong Kong. That was the first point of our journey. And from there we went on to Ushuaia, which is the southernmost city in the world, where we packed all our equipment, got ready, and got onto our ship, which finally took us to the tail end of Antarctica. Now, we just saw a very tiny fraction of Antarctica because, make no mistake, it's a very, very dangerous place. Right? It's already tough enough to handle a small expedition, but now we're 23 students and there are around 20, 30 other scientists as well, and one Russian crew to sort of take care of all these many people, you know. So it's kind of a challenge for them as well. And I don't know if many of you are following the news on that side of the world at the time. This was at the end of 2013. But many ships actually got stuck in the ice at that time. And they had to be thawed out over the span of several weeks and so on. In fact, in our crew, there was one of the people who had taken care of us personally. Her mother was on another one of those ships that got stuck. And the only reason we managed to get out is because one of the Russian crew members actually noticed the ice floating towards us a bit earlier. So he got us all out. You know, we were on Treatment Island at the time, and he got us all out immediately. He said, we need to leave now, we're going to be stranded here for maybe weeks, maybe months. And yeah, I think that would cause some problems with our visas as well. So we visited several islands, and we also visited the Chilean base. We were going to visit the Chinese and Russian bases as well, but because of the moving ice, we could not make it. So first I'm going to talk about Ushuaia. Now this entire span that you see is literally all of the city. That's it. You can walk from one end of the city to the other in the span of an afternoon if you walk fast, I guess. We trekked around to the other side to take this photograph. Now this is where we get all our equipment, because we're carrying nearly a ton of scientific equipment. There's no way we're going to take that from Hong Kong. So we had to actually work with a lot of the scientific departments which are stationed in Ushuaia. Now all these, like the Chinese base, the Russian base, the Chilean base, they all get their resources from Ushuaia, so it is pretty well stocked and we could find exactly what we needed. Ushuaia is a very, very beautiful place, quite untouched, and we actually did quite a bit of research here as well. Now this entire stretch is called Tierra del Fuego, and that actually means land of fire, but it was freezing. I actually felt more cold in Ushuaia than in Antarctica, but that's probably because in Antarctica I was dressed like underneath 5 to 6 different layers of clothing. We visited a prison in Ushuaia as well. This was actually part of the research of one of our teams, which was dealing with isolation. So they were looking at how people live in small quarters and how they are isolated. So in Antarctica, researchers can work for months, completely isolated from other human contact and their families. And they were also looking at how things are in Hong Kong public housing in terms of space, and how much space is given to prisoners in Ushuaia. They found that the size is pretty much similar per person. And this is actually now been converted into a maritime museum. So we got to see a whole bunch of stuff there as well. And I'm not sure if you guys know about this, but there's a movie called Happy Together. Yeah, so this is the lighthouse from that movie. And a lot of my local friends insisted that we have to visit this under any circumstance, so yes, we did this as well. But make no mistake, the bulk of our time was actually to do research. So this is my groupmate who's from the chemistry department, and she's measuring water salinity and turbidity and temperatures and so on. We did this at various sites in Tierra del Fuego and then in Antarctica as well. Now this was the ship that took us to Antarctica. It's got 6 decks. It was made in Finland but belongs to the Russian Navy. Not many people amongst the scientists knew this, but we became good friends with the crew because one of our crewmates was also Russian, so we could actually talk to them for us. And it just so happens that this is actually a spy vessel. This was meant to be used during the Cold War along with its sister ship, which was called the Babylon. And it's got a kind of huge antenna which submerges into the water. And its sister ship can be 20,000 kilometers away, and they can detect anything in between them. So just minor movements give you an entire coverage of if there's any other submarines, any other ships in that area. But now, since Cold War is over, it's been repurposed for research purposes. The crew was kind enough to give me my own workspace and also gave me maps and everything else that was crucial. They were actually super helpful. Like, I was kind of worried about this because I'm just a student, I'm just undergraduate. And I thought that, okay, there's so many scientists and researchers on board, so maybe they won't take what we're doing seriously. But they're super nice and they gave me my own desk. So yeah, now for our arrival. To get to Antarctica, we actually had to go through the Drake Passage, which is the roughest stretch of ocean known to humankind. We have 10-meter waves on average, and this can even go up to 20 meters. So 20 meters above sea level. So imagine 20 meters up and then 20 meters down. So 40-meter differences between waves. And there's actually a saying in the Australian Navy, which is if you cross through the Drake Passage, then that's like you're officially in the Navy now. You are allowed to keep your hands on the table, your elbows on the table when you're dining. Otherwise, you have to keep them down. It's a discipline thing. I don't know how much of this is true. We were just told by our crewmates again. We were quite lucky during our trip to Antarctica because, well, firstly, it's summer. Even though we went there during December, because yeah, southern hemisphere, so it's summer there. So the temperatures are much better than usual, which is minus 10 degrees, minus 15 degrees, as opposed to minus 45 to minus 60 degrees. And on the day that we arrived, the weather was quite clear. As you can see, there's almost no wind, that's why the water is quite still, it's like glass. But by the end of our expedition, we had raging blizzards, snowstorms, but I'll get to that a little later. Now, one of the things which all of us noticed first was that, yeah, so we all read about climate change, we all read about global warming and everything else. We think that, okay, yeah, it's happening, but it's happening somewhere else, somewhere far away. We actually went there, so we actually saw it happening firsthand. This entire shelf that you see here, now, it actually collapsed just a moment after taking this photograph. Unfortunately, I don't have a photo of that, but we saw it happening, and there were huge waves which came and pushed our rafts out of the way and so on. These entire areas, like the crew had visited the previous year as well, and there was one area which was completely covered in ice. You could walk on it, but now it was water. There's no ice there at all. So the situation is getting quite bad. So yeah, away from the morbid stuff. This is fantastic, iceberg. There were many, many different types of icebergs. One of our teams actually had the job of surveying these various different shapes and types. They're from the architectural department, and they want to make structures from the data they collected. So yeah, for those of you who are interested in working with data, we actually have a team which collected lots of images and labeled them according to which iceberg type they are. So yeah, then we operated almost entirely out of the ship. What would happen is the ship would bring us close to a harbor, and then we would get onto these little boats, and which would take us on, and we do a wet landing. So we have boots which are up to our knees, and we get off in the water and then we trek to the land. Yeah, so to actually do that, we have to wear this outer layer. Now, one thing which was stressed throughout our trip by the crew was that we have to leave zero footprint. We can't leave anything behind. We can't even, leave footprints behind because, and this is an actual thing that's happened, penguins can get stuck in your footprints. Now, the footprints aren't shallow. You kind of sink into the snow as you walk because it's all really loose. So there are times when penguins literally can't climb out of your footprints. It's like a mini cage. So every time you walk around, you have to turn back, push the snow back in to make sure that it's shallow enough for penguins to walk safely. And yes, we did get pretty close to penguins. Now there's a law, I mean, it's more like an international agreement that human beings can't go willingly within 5 meters of penguins, but they can come to you. So what would happen is we just lie down in the snow, and the penguins are just passing by and they get curious. They're not at all afraid of humans, so they just come by, and sometimes they, just walk past. Sometimes they'll even sit down or sleep next to you if they feel it. So these are boats which we use to do wet landing. The piece of equipment there is a ladybug. That's what we use to get sort of like a 360 imagery of the surrounding area. Now these boats have 12 inflatable compartments, so even if around 6 of them get ruptured, it'll still float. Now the reason why they have such redundancy is that if you fall into the water, it will take about 1 minute, 2 minutes for you to die, pretty much. It is freezing water, and they tell you not to swim. So in the rescue guidelines they say, if you're in the water, do not panic and do not try to swim back to the boat because you lose heat faster that way. So instead you're just supposed to curl up and stay in one place until they throw a rope to you, and then they'll pull the rope back once you hold on to it. So yeah, that was quite terrifying. But we did do a pull-out plunge, which was in one of the later days, where we were given the option of going out into the water, just getting in for like 5-10 seconds and then getting back out. Not everyone took the challenge. I regrettably took the challenge. One of the worst mistakes that I made in life. Because it just so happened that on that day, there was a blizzard. And imagine getting out of like 5 layers of clothing while being in snow in freaking blizzard, and then going out into freezing water, then coming back, trying to dry yourself off, and while you're frozen, trying to put your clothes back on. I don't know why that was a good idea, but yeah. We also saw a lot of the other wildlife other than penguins. Now these are I believe they're called elephant seals. We actually saw one come up out of the water and then climb on top of all of these guys. Now, they're pretty heavy and they climb on top of each other, and yeah, there's a lot of screaming and groaning happening. But again, 5 meter distance. Yeah, this is one of the penguin colonies. Now, on our ship, there were 2 people who actually they were from the Oceanity School. They do the penguin census every year. So we actually help them do penguin counting. Doesn't seem like very fun. Actually, it wasn't that much fun. But we got to see them up close and personal because this was also breeding season. Since it's summer, this is when all the penguins are laying eggs. And to keep their eggs warm, they don't have trees, they don't have grass or something else. They use rocks to keep their kids warm. And what we frequently notice is that, okay, so the females are on top of the eggs. So what do you think the males are doing? They're going around to other nests and stealing their rocks so they can bring them back and use it in their nests. This is happening all the time. So there are penguins on guard and there are other penguins who are trying to steal from behind their backs. And then they notice and then they start running around everywhere and get trapped in one of the grids, and then we realize that, okay, try and get out. We also went camping in snow for one night. We had to dig ourselves little graves. Now this was before the process. They got a little frustrated of digging, but we had to dig around 1 meter into the snow, and then we put down a mat, and we had something like a tiny personal tent which we use, and we need to get inside of that. And yeah, at this point it's still clear skies. So the only thing we had to worry about was wind. Now the wind itself, like more than anything else, I guess it's similar to Hong Kong, right? It doesn't get very cold, but when it's windy you feel, pretty cold, right? So same thing here, there's nothing blocking the path, so that's why you need to dig down, because otherwise if you just camp on the surface, you are going to freeze. But that didn't help much, because when we woke up in the morning, Like, I personally remember being buried under a meter of snow because a blizzard had started in the middle of the night. And so I had to open my tent, which is like a full body thing, and then sort of like claw my way out of this little, personal prison that the blizzard created for us. Luckily we had shovels. Okay, now there's an interesting story behind this particular blizzard. This is a Chilean military base. Now, one of the people who accompanied us on the expedition is he's Gary. He's our photographer, and he was from Sea Shepherds. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Sea Shepherds, but they are actually an organization that stops whaling and protects endangered species and so on. So, actually 2 years prior to our going to Antarctica, he had made a call to this very station to ask them to send out one of their ships to stop a whaling operation. And this wasn't planned, this wasn't on our itinerary at all. So he contacted the base again and he asked, could we come drop by or so on. And it just so happened that it was the same guy, the same military officer who picked up the call back then. And he agreed to bring us in, and he was very hospitable. They keep like 1 bottle of vodka there at all times, and they were nice enough to open it up for us. And they also gave me some of their data. Unfortunately, I couldn't get their weather station data because that's kind of like their government's data. But he did give me a lot of the data of all the visiting ships and so on. Oddly enough, there are some private ships which pass through. So just, I don't know, maybe the odd millionaire or so on, just passes by Antarctica for the visits. So I didn't know that actually happened. But yeah, there are actually many of them, around 20 in a year. Yeah, so paper is a rare commodity in Antarctica, as you can imagine. Initially, I'd asked him to give me a few sheets of paper for the data, but he's like, no way, they can't give it to me. So instead, I had like these tiny chits of paper which just happened to be stuck into my pockets. So I pulled them out and started writing down notes in the middle over there, and then the rest of the information we took through images. That's how we got the bulk of our data if it wasn't from equipment. Okay, now this piece of ice. This may look like just a standard block of ice, but it's actually black ice. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but if you were to put this piece of ice inside the water, it would be completely invisible. It is not possible to detect it. This is ancient ice. It's like 40,000-year-old ice. Okay, and the only reason it's sort of visible now is because it's sort of glazed over. It's melting a bit. So, because of global warming and so on, the ice which is at the bottom, so it's under high pressure conditions, it actually gets released and dislodged. So that's why it floats up. But it's very difficult to find it. But when I heard the story, I thought, okay, when collecting data, I kind of want a piece of black ice. So we go on, like after the expedition, so we go on a morning expedition and an afternoon expedition with lunch in between. But I decided to skip lunch one day and just go hunting for black ice with a few of the crewmates. And we just happened to find this floating in the water when it knocked against our boat. It's like super lucky. And I don't know how big it may seem to you now, but it's actually this big. And we were a group of 3 people, and we had to get out of the water with no equipment. So what actually happened was, one of them held on to my legs while I was pretty much overboard. The other guy was busy trying to stabilize the raft, and he gave me his waterproof gloves, which are like at least up to here. And I went and put my hands into the water to try and surround this huge block of ice and get out. And the gloves didn't help because I had to go deep enough that the water actually went into my gloves, and I couldn't feel my arms for the rest of the day. But luckily we managed to get it on, and then they had to use the ship's crane to actually take it onto the ship.
I have a question. If you can't see the ice in the water, how do you find it?
We found it when it knocked against our boat, actually. you can only see a bit of the surface. Now its chemical properties are slightly different from normal ice. So already ice, if you see how icebergs work and so on, only a tiny fraction of the overall shape shows above the surface of the water. For black ice, that's even less. So you can just see like a tiny bit, and the rest is like 95% of it is below the surface of the water. And yeah, we just got really lucky, to be honest. And then, yeah, we analyzed it, we shared some with the other scientists on board, and then after we were done with our research, it got sent to the bar. Because it's a Russian vessel, they have a very well-stocked bar. And that day it was like complimentary whiskey on the rocks with, yeah, ancient 40,000-year-old black ice. So we had a lot of, for lack of a better word, toys with us on the trip. This was more of a pain to use. I'm sure many of you must be familiar with this drone. It's the DJI Phantom. But the problem was that my professor's research assistant happened to forget the manual in Hong Kong. And it was completely disassembled. So I had to assemble it from scratch without any instructions.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Can you Google?
No, there's no internet. So, no instructions, I had to assemble it. I didn't even have like all the tools. I was actually I borrowed one of the girls' tweezers to actually get some of the parts working. And then finally, these drones are actually very advanced. They have a GPS feature which allows you to lock it in place. So you have strong winds and so on, it will detect where it's supposed to be and go back. I could not use any of those features. I had to use it completely in manual mode. And that was really bad because in Antarctica the winds are really fast. This drone was not designed for Antarctica at all. And later I found out that if you want to pilot like drones in an extreme environment like this, you need to go through 6 months of training. I just play video games, so I guess it's sufficient training for the most part. There was one point where I nearly got into the water, but luckily I got a signal back. Now this is supposed to have a range of around 100 meters or so, but again, it's Antarctica, nothing goes according to plan. The signal only lasted for like around 20 meters, so just 1/5. And after that, it just lost signal. So the lights started blinking red, which means that, okay, it's got no connection and I can't do anything about it. Then the wind started getting really strong and it pushed it out towards the ocean. And now I was more worried, not about losing this drone, which costed about 10,000 Hong Kong dollars at the time, but more that a piece of plastic was going to be left in the ocean. I was terrified of that because we had so many environmentalists and people on board, and we were so keen on keeping this as a zero footprint expedition that if that happened, then all the good relations which we were cultivating would completely fall apart. Luckily, just as it was coming down and about to collapse into the ocean, the signal came back on, so we managed to drag it back to land safely, and then we didn't fly it up again. So yeah, why were we using a drone in the first place? So this was one of our Russian teammates, and he wanted to do kite surfing in Antarctica. Now this was sort of an artistic expression of the impact of wind. So kite surfing as a sport is supposed to be something where you really try and make the wind your friend. You try to control it and take it where you want to go. He fumbled a lot. He could not control the wind there. It's not designed for hobby kite surfing. Luckily, the first day when he tried, he just kept getting into the water, and we had to rescue fish him out of the water each time. But luckily we had someone on board that actually experienced kite surfing, and with the whole crew we set up like vantage points on around 5 high cliffs all around the location. So this was in the middle of the harbor. And then we had perfect conditions. We made sure, so we paid attention to the wind charts and so on. We found when it's going to be a good time, when it's manageable winds. And then we got entire footage, and I had to fly the drone up and above and get in footage of him actually doing this. Now, tell me honestly, does this look like a painting? Like, do you think this is a painting or do you think this is a real photograph? Any idea?
If you ask in this way, then it is real.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've been showing you photographs of Antarctica so far, but if I showed this to you without, any background, I think it will look like a photograph. It looks like a sketch. Someone drew it.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, this is completely real, and this was on Deception Island. Deception Island is like a little ring with just one entry point. And as you're entering, you can see the remains of a ship crashed on the side. Because only a very skilled crew can actually enter Deception Island. It's literally huge jagged cliffs all around. It's like something you'd see in a fantasy novel or something. You won't find it anywhere else. With just a tiny entrance, and a ship needs to carefully maneuver and go through. Many ships have failed. That's why there are older vessels from the heyday of Antarctic exploration, and they've all crashed. So we go in there, and this is actually a volcanic region. It's an active volcano. So everything looked like Oreos. We had little black-brown soil and snow, and that's when the blizzard hit. But yeah, I mean, I have a nearly endless number of photographs, but I was told to also include a more technical side to the actual process. So if you're interested, maybe I could show more photographs later on. But for now, I'll go on to talk about what we actually did, how we collected data. So these are the data sets which my team of 3 collected personally. Now we were called the so-called observers of the team. So we monitored not only the environment and the ship and so on, but we also paid attention to what our expedition members were doing and so on. So I actually built these little sensor black boxes that collected data from each of our members. So they had to wear it on that person every time they went out on an expedition. And it would have GPS and altitude data. And it also measured temperature, humidity, and so on. I can come back to this later when I have an open discussion and so on, if any of you are interested in working with the data. So yeah, not very pretty, but I had to work with parts from Taobao, so yeah. Now this is actually nothing very complicated. I used Arduinos. At the time of doing this, I didn't really have much of hardware experience because I'm a computer engineering student, but when you're just entering the major, you don't learn a whole deal yet. It was my first semester in the major. But I was like sure that I have to use hardware. I need to get these readings. And the only way I can mass produce 23 of these is if I use something cheap like an Arduino. So I use Arduino and I use this global site GPS module. And this is very precise. This is precise up to 2 meters. So I could get GPS coordinates for everyone pretty much throughout their expedition. And yeah, so everyone had these little antennas dangling out their backpacks. And this is what the data actually looks like. Now, this is a very tiny snippet. I actually had close to 6 billion data points because 23 members being monitored, their locations being monitored throughout the entire process. And aside from their GPS and altitude, I also had data of their heading and the direction of Hong Kong and their distance to Hong Kong at all times. And what's interesting is, if I observe the data, there's a point where, okay, distance gets maximized when we're in Argentina, because we're on the other side of the world. But then as we move down to Antarctica, we get closer and closer to Hong Kong. Right? So if we were to hypothetically fly over Antarctica, then we would get, it would be the shortest way to Hong Kong. But yeah, that's not possible. So this is my workflow. Now keep in mind that I had no experience working with large data sets. Yes, everyone's done a bit of Excel maybe, but I had to suddenly work with 6 billion data points. So the first step was to actually retrieve the data from all the black boxes. Now these black boxes were sealed. I had to make them waterproof. I had to ensure that none of the snow or ice was going to get in and interfere with a delicate piece of equipment like an Arduino. So I had to dismantle everything, get the data out, clean it. Now I had to clean a lot of the data which I got on board from the ship as well, which was in Russian. So I had to get that translated accurately, so no Google Translate of course. And finally data consolidation. And the next step is getting overwhelmed. I had too much data, no idea what to do. So then I sit down with my professor and I sit down with my group mates and we just start brainstorming. We start thinking, okay, what can we do? And for the temperature, water quality and so on, it's more straightforward. You can make infographics, you can do a comparative study between Antarctica and Hong Kong. We had noise level data and so on. So we could say, okay, Antarctica, pretty pristine place. Noise levels are definitely much lower than Hong Kong. But what do I do with the GPS coordinates? What do I do with the rest of the data? So I'll come to that a little later. But then yeah, after that we do concept sketching. Unfortunately, I've lost most of those old documents where I jotted down points in the notes. But then review, fixes, design and development, consolidate results, publish infographics, assemble installation, and then launch. I'm going to go through each of these now, one by one. Now, data cleaning and stuff is very boring to show on slides, but regardless, okay, so yeah, big data, everything's a thing, but trust me, Excel is one of the best things ever that you can use for data analysis. Even if it's 6 billion points or whatever that is, Excel really helps you. No need to write code. You can easily manage all your extrapolation, interpolation, forecasting, whatever it is. So I was just playing around with a bunch of concepts. And one of the challenges was, as an engineer, I had to think artistically. I had to make an artwork. And at the time, I did not know what that implied at all. So this was me modeling in AutoCAD. Again, I'd never used AutoCAD before. I taught myself how to use AutoCAD over a weekend. And I was basically plotting out some GPS coordinates and it looked like absolute gibberish to me. I thought it was like a fun shape. But yeah, that idea quickly died out because, yeah, it makes no sense. But then I realized that as I kept playing with the GPS coordinates and I kept plotting it out on a map, I realized that, it's GPS. I had altitude data. One of the islands which we visited, Pigeon Island, we kind of scoured the entire island, like our team split up and went all throughout the island. So I technically had GPS coordinates from nearly every point of an island. That means that I can sort of recreate what the island is supposed to look like. So I used one of the algorithms which I used during my material science research. It's actually used in math quite a bit, Delaunay and triangulation. So it's nothing but, in simple terms, it's just going to be bringing your points together. Yeah, we use it for chemical bond simulation and so on in material science. But here I just need to show how it's going to model the terrain. So this is me working a bit in MATLAB. Again, MATLAB or Octave or R, you really need a statistical package if you're going to do any forward data analysis. It will just save you so much time. Forget writing code. So this is one of the results which I got in AutoCAD. I wrote my own plugin in this case, a C# plugin, so that I could do the same thing with points in AutoCAD because I want to be able to export it as a 3D model. In MATLAB, I can't really do that. So I was experimenting with a bunch of different areas, and then of course there are points, so people aren't always going to be moving. People stop in an area, they take photographs, they conduct their research, and not all the points are, well, I don't need a very, very high degree of precision if I'm going to make a sculpture or any sort of physical installation. So I reduced the number of points, and I started working with a number of the shapes which could give me a general idea of what the island would look like. And then I had to figure out, okay, I have a representation of the island and it looks pretty close to how it's supposed to. There were some pretty jagged mountains and cliffs. This is literally what it looks like, it's just a piece of land jutting down into the ocean. But how do I model it? Because despite what people would maybe tell you, budgetary constraints are a very real thing. You have to always worry about that no matter what you're working on. You can't just build whatever you want to build. So I had initially considered mental, I'd considered any number of things, but I thought, okay, I'm trying to have, while we were in Antarctica, we were looking for a zero footprint kind of thing. So I need to keep it cheap here as well. So what I did is I wrote my own script and I made these little points, these little dots you see. They're actually cylinders, okay? And they go from a certain height all the way down to the surface. And then it's a pretty simple operation. I subtract the terrain. So that gives a result like this, right? I get an inverse of what the terrain should actually look like. And this is the model which I used for making physical installation. Could have been better. I'll show you the installation shortly. But again, to get that many points and perfectly straight, I would need metal rods or glass rods or some acrylic material that I could get that cost. But I used 3,911 points already for this. And we proceeded to use rope. Possibly the cheapest thing you could get, like normal white rope tied from a grid. So yeah, those two things just lying there are the grids which we got in. And then we measured, we cut each rope. So luckily I have some programming experience, so I could get all the data out from AutoCAD without having to manually count everything. My teammates had already started manually counting. They were around 20% through and I told them I could just write code for it. But this part was completely manual. We spent a weekend to just take the rope, measure it, cut it, and then tie it to its appropriate position on the grid. Then we hang it up, and they're loose. Now one of my professors suggested that I should color the ends so the shape is visible from the outside. Now this is tough to portray in a 2D image like this, but maybe you can try and picture a better idea. Because this is what it would sort of look like from the inside. Right? When you walk around the installation, so this is a 7 meter by 5 meter installation. Alright, so when you walk all the way around it, you can actually see a sort of 3D shape of the island. Okay, because when you're seeing through, since there are gaps between the ropes, you see the other points, so you can see the entire model. And yeah, this is what it looked like at the exhibition. I was quite proud of it at the exhibition. I like it in the dark better than I like it when it's well lit. Yeah, so I'll proceed to actually talk about the exhibition. So these are some of the infographics that my team actually created. And this is primarily in our catalog. I've brought a copy of my catalog in case some of you are interested afterwards. I just have a short sample here, but this is just doing a comparative study between Hong Kong and Antarctica, Antarctica being on top, Hong Kong below. So it's just various stats. It's a much larger image. We had huge prints which were covering the walls and so on during the exhibition. And yeah, again, this is our 1 ton of equipment. So we had a whole bunch of different sensors. My teammate actually went through the effort of taking a picture of every single piece of equipment and then making a cartoonish design of it. We also recreated all the ship schematics. Now the ship was made a long time ago, so they didn't have a digital copy of the schematics at all. They just had old records in books. So we took pictures, and then we recreated ourselves. And yeah, it's made by Finland, but it's owned by Russia. And we were all kind of stationed in Deck 3. But yeah, it's got all the things that, so the Finns, for those of you who have probably been to Finland, they cannot go anywhere unless they have a sauna. So this ship has a sauna, it has a pool, it's a plunge pool, so again, freezing water, you can get in. And from the relative safety of, you can just walk back in and there's a heater on and stuff, so not as annoying as what I had to do. And yeah, there's a dining room, there's a bar, so quite well stocked actually. It seemed almost like a luxury liner. But then you see the scientists and researchers all working seriously, and then you forget about that. So the exhibition was quite a bit of success actually. We had around 300 people on day 1, and then we proceeded to have around 1,200 people coming over the span of a month. And the opening ceremony, we had projection mapping, we had all kinds of stuff. The entire School of Creative Media went crazy about this. This is the full team. That's all of us. And this is Professor Scott, who's the person who comes up with these expeditions.
And I want to highlight 3 of the attendees, they are now working in the Apps Lab.
So there's me right here, there's Harry here, and there's Manny. And all 3 of us happen to now work for Apps Lab, so we continue our, we had an almost instant bonding when we joined the Apps Lab as well, and we keep working to this day. So, now proceeding to the, my team is called the Numbers. A little corny, my taste, but and this was where it was located, in the main hall of the School of Creative Media. Now, I suggest that if you're interested, you can go onto the site. I have the link at the end of the presentation as well. And that actually shows you all the artworks, not just mine. And because everyone's done some really interesting stuff. And it seemed to be quite a hit. People actually, well, I kind of anticipated this. If you get tired, yes, you would want to sit on the soft furry carpet. And it's a pretty good vantage point to all the other artworks because it's in the center of the room. So we had almost everyone come by, take pictures, sit down. But I also made a point to kind of highlight why I built this. So this is my artist statement. But the point that I want to elaborate is, I'm using ropes here, okay? Antarctica as a landscape is constantly shifting, constantly changing, all right? I may have surveyed it for that particular point of time, but maybe a month later, maybe even a few weeks later, the landscape would have changed already. It's very fragile, and it can shift and change on its own, but if human beings aren't paying attention, then it can change in a much more drastic manner. When you walk through this installation, you're going to end up tangling some of the ropes, right? It's going to mesh, it's going to move, it's not going to look as nice as before. You're leaving your trace, this is your footprint. You have affected the artwork. Now, you can either leave it like that, and it's going to sort of mess with how the artwork looks, or you could actually proceed to fix the ropes back, make them nice and straight again, to try and remove your impact. But regardless of whether you do that or not, sometimes even if, I don't know, the aircon is on too hard or whatever, there's too much wind, the ropes are going to sway, they're going to move, they're going to tangle anyways. So I wanted to sort of bring that message across that, it's constantly shifting, it's constantly in a state of flux. So far, does anyone have any questions?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I have a question. So you said you're gathering like a team of people there, how they move the GPS data, right?
Yeah.
So some of them, may overlap, right? So is that when you do this kind of 3D modeling, you have some kind of smoothing, or you remove the point and repeat?
Yeah. So I actually I took it into MATLAB again, And also, I kept to make sure that no overlaps happening. I used a website called GPS Visualizer, and they have inbuilt functions for removing overlapping data sets and to remove GPS artifacts. So a GPS artifact would be if there are many points which are closely grouped together, then it will remove them and just take the most informative point. So I had 6 billion overall, but for that particular island I had around 500 million points, and I fed it through these algorithms which would remove those GPS artifacts and give me only the most informative points. So that's how, because I also anticipated that people would stay in one place sometimes. So since I'm collecting data every 5 seconds, chances are I'd have many data points which are just in a single location, and that would be redundant data. Yeah, and that just increased my computational overhead. So I ran it through these steps first before I actually made the model.
That's a very good question. And in fact, the technical term for this is called the data cleanup. So how do you actually clean up the data?
So, any other questions? Yeah.
Just a random question. On hindsight, I would have used friction wire instead of plain white ropes to enhance the visual effect. Has that thought ever come by?
Yeah, we actually considered many different options, but our biggest constraint more than anything else was time. Because we actually went for the expedition in December, and then this exhibition was in May. And I only decided what I'm going to do around, like I got my final 3D model and everything else around a week or 2 weeks before the exhibition. And we also have exams, we have our other responsibilities too. So then we went out to find, actually initially we wanted acrylic rods because it would be more aesthetically pleasing. But no time to make an order that large for that much material in a given time. The only material which you could get was rope, because, and not, we wanted to also do something like a color gradient of all our, because we had other data, we had all the photographs people had taken. So I'd actually written code to extract the color information from these photographs, so I could show which parts of the island represent which color. So we had all these ideas and concepts, but to get colored rope, you need around 3 weeks time for such a huge order. So we could get white rope or brown rope, which would look quite bad. So white rope it was. That being said, I have been offered a chance to actually perhaps do this in London as well. It would require a lot of work because I have to do this again and build the whole thing, or maybe hire people to do that, and I don't have that kind of funding right now. But maybe sometime in the future I could extend on this concept. Maybe work with the other islands as well. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Then I'll move on to talk about my current work at the City Apps Lab. So, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the Apps Lab, but it is headed by Dr. Ray.
Hi, everybody.
And they follow a sort of 3-pronged approach. All right. Now, first is training. They regularly hold coding workshops for all levels, whether you're a secondary school student or even if you're a doctor or a lawyer or whatever it is, you can come and learn how to code. Now, if you're a CU student, you can also proceed to, after a certain level of expertise, of course, go on to work on projects, whether it's in-house or whether it's for external clients. Right? So you can get some practical work experience. And then the final thing is a lot of students like to consider working either for a startup or making their own startups. So Apps Lab also tries and gives support in terms of contacting them with the angel investors and giving them an environment where they can learn and grow. So if you want to know more about Apps Lab, then you can check out appslab.hk. And maybe at the end of the presentation, I can give the floor to Dr. Ray for Dr. Apps Lab. Now, the first thing I do at the Apps Lab is app development. and for internal and external clients. Now, I worked in 2 major projects, and most of what I do is, aside from that, related to consultancy for some banks and so forth. And I work primarily as an iOS developer, but I do, which maybe some of you may know, an Android phone Nexus 5. But I like to keep the policy that I learn and what I need to learn. I try and fit into the holes where, which need to be fulfilled. So at the time, I believed that they needed more iOS developers, so I learned how to do that. And I did project management and also UX design and so forth, and helped with documentation standards. So the way we work at the Apps Lab is more relaxed, I would say, than if you were to work in industry. But it still is a productive environment. Now, yes, there's Agile, there's so forth. We don't really use Agile, but we do have a sense of rapid prototyping. We do take our deadlines very seriously. So we start with the project brief, after which we do an internal feature review, then we do development and thorough testing. We show it to the client, if they need any changes or if it's what they had in mind, then we improve. And this kind of cycle works for every single feature that we have. So, yeah, we take communication very seriously. So I introduced this, some of you may have used this Trello, it's sort of like a Kanban board system. And we ensure that everyone knows what everyone else is doing at every stage. So we have a designer, we have iOS, Android, backend. We have every stage well outlined. We have our project requirements. And at any time, anyone from the organization can come and have a look and see what's actually happening. So one of the first apps that I worked on was actually a rather fast, but we had only like a month to develop it. And this was for interns to keep in touch with the management department. So they send out interns every year. They're from their 3rd year, and it's a year-long internship. And most students gave feedback that they're sort of disconnected from their departments. So that's why we were approached to actually make this app, which is to give a forum for people to actually keep in touch with not only the department but also others and get feedback from other people in the industry. And this was released using enterprise accounts, so it isn't on the App Store. And the next thing which I worked on recently, it's currently in app review, is the Apps Lab member application. And this is sort of like, an information portal. It's got a news feed, it's got events. It's actually planned to be open to the general public. So if any of you are also interested in any of Apps Lab workshops and so on, or any talks, we have a lot of entrepreneurs coming in. And we also have something known as the DDS Gal Talk, which draws in quite a big crowd. And you can register for all these events here. Yeah, so that is what I did for the past year. But now I want to focus on what I found most interesting. So I've tried aerospace, I've tried material science, I've tried working with data, and I feel data is kind of my thing. And there's also a pretty big buzz about data nowadays, as many of you should be aware, with the whole data science revolution. But to me, it's more about, I like data science, and I'm actually considering pursuing oceanography after the whole Antarctica experience. So that's why I'm working with, primarily on machine learning and distributed systems right now. And I have a small team, and we spend the bulk of our time actually learning right now. Because it is important to think outside the box and come with novel approaches, yes, but it's also good to have a solid foundation to inform those approaches. So when I did the Antarctica expedition, I didn't have any of this information. I didn't know machine learning or anything. I just knew how to write code, yes, but that's like almost everyone else in the computer science and computer engineering department. So now I've been doing a lot of machine learning on the side. I work on actually accelerating machine learning on GPUs and using Tiano and so forth, and working to contribute to open source in that case. And we're also working to curate some open data that we collect and solve some real-world data science problems. We are currently also in the process of getting some data from Hong Kong Airport to try and solve their logistic issues and work on like anomaly detection and so on. And we also intend to take part in some Kaggle competitions. Again, Kaggle is the self-proclaimed home of data science. What companies do is they can come onto Kaggle and they can post their real-world problems. So it can be GE, it can be Deloitte, it can be almost any company, you name it, and they provide their data for free, openly available to the public, and you can use that data and sort of come up with your own solutions to their problems. And if you win, then you get a considerable amount of prize money, but it is winning is kind of a long shot at this stage, so our goal is not to win, but to learn and actually use, because many of these data sets are like, 100 GB, 200 GB, so on. So while we aren't going to terabyte scale as of yet, it is a good starting point to working with large data sets. And aside from that, yeah, we're looking to share our knowledge with the community and get feedback as well. So in closing, yeah, that's pretty much the end of the presentation. I've told you about our expedition, what we actually did, and the exhibition and what I do now. So thank you, and I hope that we can have an open discussion. Feel free to ask me any questions that you may have. And if you're interested, you can contact me on my email, or you can also visit the artwork website to see the rest of the artworks.
So maybe there's a first. Thank you. Okay, so any other questions?
That's a very interesting talk. In fact, it's also my first time listening to this level of sharing. Although he's a final year project advisor, but you can see he's very passionate. He has a lot of knowledge. I think you guys would like to know, and also he's very willing to share. And in fact, because of the lab here is called Open Innovation Lab, I really like the first word, open. And in fact, this is exactly what is missing in Hong Kong. There are a lot of talents in Hong Kong. Really, there are lots of talent, but I think you guys should actually meet each other and see each other more often. And that's how we can actually create a synergy. Allow me to get the stage to say a few more words.
Yeah.
Then can you go to the slide with the free stage of the camp? I'm not here to promote the lab. I'm just here to tell you guys how that is getting good resources from this type of platform. Okay. So he mentioned that when he talked about the second point, if you still remember, he said only the CTU student will work on the project. In fact, that was the old way. In fact, I'm here to tell you there are a lot of good projects that we need more people. In fact, there's a shortage. Even for the lab, we need people to work on the project. We would like you to join us as well. And even for that, as mentioned about the CB internship app, you spend 1 month, and maybe you can also share with the guys here, you get some good pay for that as well. So that means this job is well paid as well. So I also want to let you know that if you just go to this page, you can give a like, depends on you, but I want you to know one of the news I shared today. Okay, this is the news I shared today. So this guy, he is a Kung Fu master. If you can see those little dots, it's also related to the topic tonight. He is generating massive number of data. If you just look at this picture, if you can look carefully, even for his hand, he's a celebrity, okay? Even for his hand, he got over 10 different dots. Imagine with such a motion like this, he's generating a lot of data. But the reality is that we need people, you, to join us to work on this project. And I'm thinking whether if you would like to join, let me know, and we will have a project like this First of all, is utilizing your knowledge. Second is very important, is generating huge impact to the community, and will be able to make your profile shining. And I think it's very important. Like that, you can see that he's preparing for his GRE exam next week, and you can see he's getting ready to go to the US. We are not keeping people in Hong Kong. We are sending you to a better place. And I think this is very important for you guys to know what is available, and we should work together, because the competitor is not CTU and Chinese U. In fact, I'm a graduate from Chinese U as well. So I think it's very important for all the university in Hong Kong, all the talent you guys should meet and see each other today. At least you can see we've got that. It's not the only instance from CTU, and you can see the Hong Kong U, Baptist U, Poly U, and we want to promote this type of open innovation. And I think this is the idea why I'm here. I know Pili, I know you guys. I just want to promote. This is the thing that we need. We need to see each other more often. So if you like the page and you know there's some event ongoing in the CTU side, my daughter, she's very excited when I speak. So you can see, if there's some event that you are interested, come and join us. And there are lots of good events coming up. I'll give one example. We already confirmed in November 24th. The company called Riverbed. I'm not sure if you know it. It's a performance tuning. You can tune the back-end software and also tune the mobile apps front-end. They will improve the performance. I know nothing about it, but the guy, they will come and share. We welcome you to join us and learn from all these important resources. So that's why I want to highlight is there are lots of good resources available, and I just shared this link when Deb was speaking. This is TED Prep. Have you heard about that? So TED Prep is a global initiative from Facebook, and this is supported by McKinsey. McKinsey, I think some of you know, is a very important company doing consultation, and this is a 3-minute video.
Computer science is the art of teaching a computer what to do. I'll start with something similar, like a screwdriver is a tool that is made to kind of turn screws, and on its own it's useless. You have to take it in your hand and kind of turn it to make something happen.
A computer actually learns a set of instructions and actually transform that into a way of showing a movie or playing an audio file or delivering Facebook. And that whole study of how the computer thinks is computer science.
It's code, and so code is a bunch of symbols and letters, but it's really more like a language.
I got here from Puerto Rico and I didn't know English, so I had to spend a lot of time trying to perfect my English. Programmers do the same thing. They learn new languages to do new things. They are inputting this language and these instructions into the computer so the computer can do what they want it to do.
Growing up, I was one of the very few people who had access to a computer around me. And I remember being bored one day and I picked up this book that was near the computer that said basic programming. And they had this really simple getting started, a hello world program that you could write in BASIC. And I remember writing it and recognizing that, wait, hold on, I just put this thing in and taught this computer how to do that, and it came back out. And I had my brother come in and use it. And he's like, oh man, you made the computer say hello? It's like, yeah, I did. Isn't that cool?
In our everyday lives, you speak language and you use that to communicate and instruct when you're around people. Similarly, a programming language is exactly the same thing. It's just a language that you use to talk to the computer.
And think about the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning, let's say it's an alarm clock. There are instructions that somebody put into that alarm clock to teach it how to tell time, how to respond to you hitting the snooze button. You're walking out the house and you jump in your car and you start. There are lots of computers in there figuring out how to turn the engine the very first time, how much gas to put in. This set of instructions that people have put into all these little devices you've used throughout your day just made your day that much easier to get through.
You want directions, or you're dialing a phone number, you're actually interacting with a computer to solve the problem at hand. That's computer science and programming right there. It's every day, in your hand.
Programming and computer science is one of the best ways to have impact in the world. There is no other career, no other field where you can touch so many people's lives with just a simple software or a simple app. And it's specifically also important for diverse communities to be involved because of the fact that computers are everywhere, programming is everywhere, and we want an equal representation when we are building programs.
We need people who have a broad range of perspective to find different solutions.
Creating products for the people, you need to be the people. And if we hope to have products out there that really serve our needs, we need to be involved. Programming, learning computer science, and being part of the creation process of this new wave of innovation.
Right. So this video is not very long, but I want to tell you this video is very important because one of the things that troubled me recently is trying to explain to laymen why coding is important. What is coding? Even I talked to the Chinese U president for 3 times. I mean, I say coding is very important. You need to support this type of thing. He asked me why coding is important. So I want to tell you, if you look at this video, you may find out doing a screwdriver, things like that. They are using a very interesting approach to explain to general public why coding is important. In fact, even for me, I can't explain very well, but I need your help. We need to work together to tell the general public. They are talking about in 2020, there will be over 1 million jobs related to programming, and we all know this is going to happen. So how can we actually, I want to bring my daughter here because I want, come on. Yeah, I want her to know coding, learning is fun, and I think this is important. So, after all, I just want to tell you, I think for this community, you all are, I also follow you guys very often. I know you guys are looking into some very advanced technology, but I would say that's not enough. We need more people. First of all, we need more people. If you guys can get more people, the more event, the more interesting event we can get. So I hope, I just want to promote we should work together more often. I pass the time back to Deb. Thank you all.
So any questions for Dave?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually for you say the project.
Yes.
Actually, did you have the project list?
Yes, I do have a project list. I'm really desperately looking for project. This is one of the projects, and there's another project I can tell you. Is we are working with a DBS Bank. We are going to place a real robot in the branch, and this robot will do the face recognition. And I say, hey, little girl, you are coming back here today 3 times. You can imagine in this image processing. And I know there's a researcher, there's a professor, I forgot which department. He's a pioneer in facial recognition. I think this is something that you can contribute and chip in. If no matter your PhD, undergrad or master, I think there's a room for you to contribute.
Interesting.
Yeah, yes.
So about the Ad Lab, right?
Yes.
Is it kind of like a platform that connects companies that need tech help with tech workers, or people who know how to code? And is that the thing? I'm not very sure, because on one side you kind of promote yourself as you support young entrepreneurs who are trying to do this, but then there's also a platform where you can find work. Apparently, is that the case?
We want to see the progression. So first of all, I start from the end tail. I want to tell you is in these 2 years we already roll out 10 different companies. So that means we have successful case people that are starting their company. So we jump back to the previous stage. People like that, they are able to finish 1 or 2 or even 3 projects. And it depends on the schedule because they have got their midterm final exam, their other course project. They are very busy.
I see.
Okay, but we give them the timeline and we give them some expertise, some experience. If he is starting a project and that knows how to complete project, he will share the knowledge, not me. So we believe in a community knowledge sharing. Okay, and get back to the project list is there will be different types of project, hardware, software, and we want to recruit more people. And then we jump back to the previous level is doing the coding. So coding thing is we just feel that this is far beyond the global standard Hong Kong. So that's why we want to do more work in this end. And for people, if you like programming, doing the real work, you may not like the teaching. It's fine. It's also up to you to choose which path you want to go.
So for example,
Yes.
let's say someone has a startup that's funded and needs certain projects done.
Yeah.
Do they list them with you?
They contact us. They keep on saying they want talents. And that is the problem with us. We can't offer them so many people.
I see.
And for example, I'll give you one example. If you go to the lift in engineering building, you check carefully, there's a poster, say S loyalty. You can see that's S loyalty. I know the two founders. One guy is a former Googler. Okay, he's a Hong Kong guy. He used to work in Google and he come back to Hong Kong. There's another guy, his name is called Roland. I know him because he came back from Stanford, so he's a very smart guy. Both of them, they are tech guy. And they keep on asking me almost every month, do you have people? So that's why I would say, I'm not pushing you all to some like a big four firm or some major company. I would say there are lots of different opportunities that you guys can try. Could be more lightweight, you can go there for a week, you can experience. If you don't like, you can go somewhere else. And I think this type of experience is very important.
Is it purely limited to coding? Because after all, I think, right, like in a startup situation, it's not just the coding. Coding is a big part. It's a very big part, and it's often the part that is the most scarce, right? Especially like you see those business guys say, "Oh yeah, I got an idea. I just need some code." It's ridiculous. But
I understand your question. I think the reality is that the first task usually this company will offer will be the software testing for you. So you will learn how to build up the test cases for the software, and then you will learn this process. Once you know how to test the software, then you will jump into the development cycle, piece by piece. And this is, I would say, one of the components that you'll be learning. And then from there, you will learn all the different technologies, like IBM or different technologies. And then you can chip in your knowledge. And later on, I don't think it's just programming part. There will be some other thing you need to negotiate and learn. And I think this knowledge will be very useful, helping you to decide whether you want to go for a career in a company or you can go for a career in higher education. Especially, yes.
Just for curiosity,
Yeah.
do the APP lab have people with talent in image processing now? Because I have a startup and want to find some image processing.
I can tell you, just before Deb and I, we came to Chinese U, we were focusing on the robot. So the robot is able to do some sort of visual recognition. We do have people in that image area, but I don't think it's a talent. For my research, I'm doing some H.265 research, so we do image compression. But I would say the people are there, is the matter how we bring them in, and also they know your project. And then eventually, when they get inspired, they will not sleep and they will finish your work. I think this is our model. We believe those students, if we can find the right match, everything will be so easy. But first of all, we need to break the ice to let them know this is a fascinating area we want to know more. Yeah, that can contribute.
As for the previous question, like that we focus not only on software development, AppsLab actually has a bunch of other events. So it has some talks and also pitch and match nights. So what happens is students from the business department, from management, from even public policy and so on, they can come and meet developers and other people, and they can pitch their ideas. And here it's not pitching to just investors, it's pitching to other people to see their interest to work with you. So there we get a lot of cross-pollination of ideas, lots of people from different departments work.
I give one example, that gives a very good comment. You have a business idea, and you talk to me and Greg, and then eventually you want me to join your company. For example, you like my style, but then he wants to join you. Okay, so AppsLab serves as a middle layer. We do the matching in between. So that kind of thing, we provide that kind of service. And eventually, we form the team together and then we roll out something nice.
So
yes.
question for, actually I did a project of the
Kung Fu,
so,
that's nice.
Yeah, so I'm thinking what kind of skills do you require if...
We are using Unity. So we use Unity and then you do the clean out. Unity for personal use is free, but then later on we We also provide some fundamental training, but eventually you need certain type of domain knowledge, like how do you model a human, how do you make it more like a human, that kind of thing. You need to drag closer, more detail to it. And I can't teach you. It really depends on the
Yeah,
student.
so basically I have no idea what that is. So if I want to join, so like what kind of requirements do you want?
Can you come out?
Well, if you're working in the field of code, then yeah, as you mentioned, you need to have more detailed knowledge of how the human body actually works. And if you have experience with working with point clouds and so on. But that being said, a lot of the work that we've done, right, is from the bottom level up. You have to be very flexible, like to learn what needs to be learned. Because we understand that not everyone has specialized domain knowledge to fit a project perfectly. Right? Even when I, for example, entered Apps Lab, I'd never made an app before. I didn't even do web development before, just normal programming. But it's all about keeping an open mind. And then I decided, okay, I'm going to learn this, I'm going to learn that. Even machine learning, I just picked it up on my own side, and now I'm working on data sets which are like 200 to 500 GB in size and stuff. So it's more about, yeah, being willing to go that extra mile to actually learn something new.
I can add another good news on top of Deb's comment. So, for example, in the Apps Lab currently we form 9 different teams. So one of the teams that is leading is called Data Analytics team, around 10 people, and there's another team called Unity team. So if you would like to join this project, you will definitely join this Unity team. There's a team leader already, and there's some students already completed project with using Unity. They'll be there to give knowledge, and then once you join, you get the basic knowledge, what kind of tutorial, what kind of thing you need to learn. You start moving fast, and then later on, we will give you some idea of what kind of human knowledge you need. And Kung Fu, you think you don't need to do it because there's a Kung Fu master. There are a bunch of Kung Fu masters to teach you or to share with you how to evaluate the motion properly. So that kind of knowledge, I think, is what we can offer. But get back to the oil. I think oil is a technology knowledge hub. I think getting the knowledge, you need to question yourself, what's next? How do you apply your knowledge? Not just compiling the kernel every day. We want to apply something more practical. I think this is the question I want to bring to you today, and I hope they can also add some value to all of you.
Yes, in fact, previously we also have 2 tutorials about Unity, and I think it is a great example about how to use apply technology to the practice.
Yeah. So I think you have asked a wrong rate, is it? No, I just mean you asked a very good question. That if we are able to provide this, and then we can help and broadcast and do the match and that kind of thing, we can bring the project here and then we start to work together. Remember, it's only 2 or 4 stations away, Kowloon Tong and the university. We are not very far away, and there are lots of things we can work together, and this is a very important message.
And to build on what I said earlier, so I said that yeah, we have to be willing to learn, but that doesn't mean you're alone. Almost everyone, so we take it very seriously that, you know, if someone else is working in a particular domain, they should not just have that knowledge inside their heads. They shouldn't just keep it to themselves. It's an open environment. So suppose, okay, I've never done app development before, then I can go to someone who has years of experience. For example, we have someone called Kenny in our team, who's our senior manager, and then I can talk to him and he can point me in the right direction. He may have solved the problem which could take me maybe hours to do, he can solve it in 5 minutes. So he just tells me, you know, okay, you can solve it like this. So similarly, Doctor has been kind enough to actually put me in an office building with his PhD students. So I get to regularly talk to them about their domains. So for example, I'm working on GPUs now. There is someone who's actually been writing papers on GPU computation. So I can work with him asking for advice. Similarly, there are people working in FPGAs, image compression, and so on. You can approach the people who work in those domains, and you can grow yourself that way. You don't have to learn everything by yourself.
Yes. So